I've been campaigning for nature for 30 years, for the tropical forests, for the oceans, for declining species and for pollution controls, including those needed to stabilize the Earth's climate. One of the things that's kept me going over the years is how there has been progress, at least on some issues and in some parts of the world. And yet, overall, nature continues to be in decline. You can see this in ongoing deforestation, the rising levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the ever-lengthening list of endangered species, and the depletion of key resources, including marine fish stocks and soils. All of that is, of course, truly troubling. It is as well, actually, also quite surprising if you think about it. After all, if you look at the stated intentions of governments across the globe and the increasing number of commitments from international companies to do more to protect nature, you'd think that by now things would be going in a better direction. The fact that that is not happening raises for me what is perhaps the most important question of our age. Why? Why, after all the passionate promises to stop the rot, is nature still in decline? In looking for answers to that question, I've reached the conclusion that it is not mainly for want of more environmental laws that we are lacking, but more an economic system that is fit for purpose. I've seen time and again how the degradation of nature is permitted, justified, and even promoted in the name of what we've come to call economic growth. You see that story repeated in politics and the media day after day. So familiar an assumption has it become that we must sacrifice nature in order to achieve progress that it's hardly ever even questioned any longer. Not by most politicians, not by most journalists, and perhaps most worrying of all, not even by most economists. I spend quite a bit of my time working with senior executives from international companies. Sometimes I ask them what proportion of the world economy they believe is dependent upon nature. Think yourself for a second what the answer might be. Some of them say it's 10%, some say it's 20%, some of them say it's more. Of course, the actual answer is that it is 100%. After all, which bit of the economy doesn't rely on clean air, fresh water, and food to be able to continue? The more we degrade natural systems, of course, the more we jeopardize the supply of those and other vital necessities, and in the process undermine the future of the economy. It's a very simple point I try to get them to see. No nature, no economy, no growth, no business. From the grasslands to the tropical rainforests, and from the coral reefs to the blanket bogs that clothe the mountains, we rely fundamentally upon nature, including elements that are too tiny to even see. The numberless trillions of phytoplankton drifting in the surface of the oceans, and the multitudes of microorganisms that work recycling miracles in soils, enabling them to function. Our planet is not run only by big ecosystems, but also by tiny life forms whose importance is too great to overstate. And yet, we destroy natural habitats, we degrade the land, and we permit the ongoing pollution of the oceans, as if nature's systems and diversity have no value. Such is the scale of the mismatch between rising economic demand and what our planet can indefinitely supply, that it is now time for us to step back, to take stock of our current direction of travel, and to think through the likely destination it is taking us toward. And if we wish to avoid that destination and to head somewhere more positive, then of course we're going to need a new economic idea in order to take us there. I call that idea the bioeconomy and believe strongly that the time has come to forcefully make the case for it. It's based on a simple premise, and the fact that if we wish our economies to continue into the future, then they must sustain the biosphere that sustains all life, that sustains the economy. At heart in this idea is a shift in perception, and to see economy and biosphere as linked and interdependent, rather than as now, where we see them as separate. And worse still, we encourage one, the economy, to cannibalize the other, the biosphere, in a process that is progressively running down the Earth's life support systems. More and more people are beginning to glimpse some of the fundamental ways in which all of this works. Take the case of pollinators. Concerns are being expressed in different parts of the world about the threats to food security arising from the decline in insects, including bees. This is not surprising when you know that some 2/3 of our crop plant varieties, with a total annual market value of around $1 trillion, are dependent upon insects for their continued production. Those kinds of financial numbers that come alongside the relationship between butterflies, beetles, bees, and our food supply can sound a little abstract until you go to those parts of the world where the pollinators have been decimated. In parts of southwestern China during the 1980s, very heavy pesticide use was advocated in order to be able to protect fruit harvests from pests. In some ways, it was a successful strategy, except the chemicals killed the wild pollinators as well. And if you go to that part of southwestern China next spring and go to the fruit orchards, you will see the farmers climbing in the apple and pear trees, feather dusters in hand, moving the pollen between the blossoms because the bees that once did that job are no longer there. The loss of pollinators caused by the overuse of chemicals, habitat destruction, and changed farming practices is a good example of how the economic mindset that lies behind modern agriculture is sowing the seeds of its own destruction. Other impacts it causes speak of a similar mindset, soil degradation and depletion of groundwater among them. We're also finding that nature supports public health in many, many different ways. Take the case of India's vultures. Once the most abundant large birds of prey on Earth, during the early 1990s, they began a catastrophic decline. The cause was the introduction of an anti-inflammatory drug in veterinary medicine. It proved very effective in getting sick cattle and buffalo back on their feet. But what nobody realized was that when residues of that drug were left in the body of a dead animal that would attract flocks of vultures that would feast upon its corpse, that drug was lethal to the birds. It caused organ failure and they died. Within a few years, the vulture population crashed from around 40 million birds to just a few tens of thousands hanging on in remote areas. With the loss of the birds, 12 million tons of meat that they were previously eating was left in the countryside, dead bodies of animals that the birds would once have cleaned up. That became a nutritional windfall for other scavengers. In this case, the principal beneficiary was India's wild dog population. As the vultures crashed, the dog numbers rose, an estimated 7 million extra feral dogs in a few years. More wild dogs meant more dog bites. Dogs are the principal vector for rabies, and dog bites in India over the course of a decade caused infections that led to 50,000 extra deaths from rabies amongst the human population than would have occurred had the vultures still been there. That impact, alongside other costs that came with it, is estimated to have cost the Indian economy around $35 billion between 1993 and 2003. Such are the surprising ways in which the rich tapestry of ecological connections on planet Earth support human welfare. Now take a breath of air. The oxygen we all just breathed in is, of course, essential for animal life. That much we all know. What is perhaps more surprising is how at least half of the oxygen you all just inhaled was replenished back into the atmosphere by those phytoplankton drifting in the surface of the oceans. The remainder of that life-giving gas is maintained in the atmosphere at a concentration optimum for us by plants on land. Even this fundamental fact of life is, however, subject to ongoing change. In this case, due to the warming and acidification of the oceans, in turn caused by the release every year of billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the combustion of fossil fuels and deforestation. Surely, if the way we are choosing to develop our economies impacts on the systems that sustain the very air we breathe, we have good cause to question our present direction of travel. So what's needed to move towards the bioeconomy, to embed our economic system inside the systems of nature in a harmonious way? One thing I believe we need to work on urgently are different measures of progress. Crude estimates of growth in gross domestic product tell us very little about the changing state of nature, even those systems that are underpinning development in the first place. We need to replace those crude estimates with more sophisticated measures that take full account of the changing state of nature, including new accounting rules for corporations and the presentation of new national accounts by countries. If we had that, then policymakers would find it much easier to use tax rules, regulations, public spending choices, subsidies, and trading schemes to begin the process of internalizing these so far hidden costs that emerge from the different choices that society make. It would help to close the fundamental problem we have, whereby the loss of nature is appearing on nobody's balance sheet. Then there would be a different approach towards engineering and technology, with a far greater emphasis on ecosystems in building what might be called green infrastructure. This could include the protection and restoration of peatlands in order to secure fresh water supplies and to be able to reduce flood risk. The conservation and enhancement of forests as very effective carbon capture and storage systems, and the protection of coral reefs, salt marshes, and mangroves as highly cost-effective and flexible coastal defences. That green infrastructure would be combined with landscape-level planning for the sustainable production of food in ways that conserve ecosystems and natural habitats within farmed landscapes. By protecting the incredible diversity of life on land, we would also protect the future of agriculture. And by looking after habitats and improving soil health, would take a further step towards future water security, at the same time as maintaining those assets that are vital for the future of rural development across the world. Another hallmark of the bioeconomy would be the extent to which it's both circular and also renewable. At present, much of our economic activity is linear. We take resources from the environment, we make products, we use them, and then we dispose of waste to the land, to the air, and to the seas. Many of those resources are, of course, from finite sources, including fossil fuels. By mimicking nature and moving towards a zero-waste economy that is powered by renewable energy sources, including wind, solar, wave, and tidal, we could dramatically reduce the impact we're causing on the systems that sustain us. The really good news about the bioeconomy is that we can harness some of the more positive aspects of our current economy in getting there more quickly, including entrepreneurial creativity and technological innovation. There's even a really big role for accountants. Beyond the detailed policy choices that we could adopt in going towards the bioeconomy, really is a shift in mindset and our ability to see the world as it truly is, and to see how our economic system is a subset of nature and not the other way around. The sooner we get used to that basic reality, then the sooner we'll be able to get on the path towards the sustainable future it is surely our moral responsibility to create, if not for our own sakes, then at least for our children and for theirs, and indeed for the rest of life on Earth. Thank you so much.